Hey everyone, we haven't looked at one of these for ages, so I thought we could combine two videos that I normally do into one, ranking every AD from best to worst and looking at their best builds and runes properly at the same time. The first 10 we're going to look at are really good AD carries for Saleh Q right now. You could mix the order depending on your playstyle and how you want to play AD, but this is kind of just like in general. The one you can't really mix though, we're going to start with Lucian is the best AD for Saleh Q by a mile in my opinion. He's way too strong and good in almost every single game. He's good early game and he scales okay if you can combo and like animation cancel properly, but his mid game is just insane. Like damage from range, you're tanky, you can kite, you can duel, and you can burst people down. So the build is still press the attack. The only real difference is that mana flow ban is taken a lot more now. We talked about getting a fairy charm in the lane phase, but this just gives you a bit more mana. The build hasn't really changed that much either. The crit version makes you stronger late game, and you have this kind of like transition phase where you're moving from ability to auto attack damage as you start to build crit. The Essence Reaver slotting in third is something that we talked about a little while ago, I think last week in a video, but it gives you more ability damage, more mana to use, obviously more cooldown reduction, and focuses on the kiting and the bursting style of play. Sivir being our second choice here might be a little bit weird, but she is like the most reliable AD you can pick and one of the safest. With damage everywhere in the game at the moment, you can just farm amazingly well, so you get your items quicker, you can't really lose your lane with your wave clear, and later you're going to auto attack and you're going to crit. That's pretty much it, as well as speeding up your team, I guess. Runes, you can go pressy attack and lethal tempo if you want to, but most of the time it is feat footwork for the healing because you're building full damage, and we still take celerity because of the move speed synergy with our ultimate. The build is actually a little bit anti-synergy though, which is a bit weird, but because you want to W with the Stormrazor proc to guarantee crit every bounce, it's still good, but normally you would auto attack into your W for a reset, and that doesn't really work anymore. The damage with your Q really does help improve your mid game massively, and that was buffed a few patches ago as well, and rapid fire cannon is awesome for that as well with the long range bounce crits. Kaiser is still a solid carry, and if you get ahead, she's amazing, but with those passive nerfs, her mid game took a giant hit if you don't win your lane. With the strong support, you can win your lane, so it's not the end of the world. You're very mobile, you can kite everybody, you have good burst, auto damage, you can survive, and you can definitely carry late game. So there are two pages actually. The first one is fleet footwork, and then it will swap to press attack with domination a little bit as well. We'll talk about that actually in a video later this week, but it just gives you a bit more healing and a bit more damage with press attack. I'd say the first build is probably going to be the best at the moment, so crit edges out AP just a little bit after all of the changes. Most of the changes were nerfing the AP style of play and not really the AD version. AP does still work for sure, it just relies a bit more on your abilities for damage rather than just your auto attacks, and it can feel a little bit slower to start and mid game where a lot of fights tend to happen and are really important for whether you win the game or not. Draven is one of the best if you're good with him for sure, hyper aggressive and can single-handedly win a game if he gets ahead, which is not that easy to do with an AD carry anymore. A lot of it will come down to the lane phase and how that plays out, but with a big lead you can basically do whatever you want in the game. Runes are going to be Conqueror still, there's no real change there. The only thing with the items is that you are going to be going Stormrazor and Bloodthirster into crit. It hasn't really changed much. It's early AD and lifesteal into crit afterwards, and then you're taking celerity because of the synergy with your W. Both builds seem to have similar win rates, by the way. Whether you want to get the Stormrazor or Bloodthirster first is kind of up to you. Stormrazor just is a lot cheaper, which can definitely help you snowball, and it is a bit more damage with the guaranteed crit. I'm convinced Ezreal is actually better than before after his W change, even though I don't see a ton of him and his win rate didn't really change either. It's still the same idea. He has cheap items, so he has a great mid game where he has more items than the other AD carry and is really safe. But his poke is better now, W into Q every single time, similar skill shots, quite easy to hit, you hit both and the damage is nuts. The build and the runes haven't changed at all, but I will say, especially now after the W stuff, having a Trinity Force is way better with the improved sheen damage and the extra it's going to factor in the burst and stuff with your W. You'd basically only really want to pick Iceborne now versus full AD with the armor and the kiting, or if you're mega behind, but the damage is a lot worse and so is the win rate. So Jhin has shifted into more of the crit style of play now after Halo Blade's nerf. I've noticed he's kind of easy to play against early in the lane phase, but his crits later really sting. It's kind of combined with the move speed as well he gets from those crits to make him really hard to lock down, but it's a long range poke with the auto attacks, good fight setup, and damage from range. The build is a lot of like in and out, I guess, with the crits, but after Stormrazor you have some very good damage and it keeps getting better throughout the game as well. You might have a little bit of a lull and you still have an issue with tanks, but otherwise you can burst people down. The only other option you can go for is no Guardian Angel, but going into 100% crit with a Phantom Dancer or a Shiv. It has a pretty good win rate. It's more risky, but a lot more damage. Vayne is definitely a lot better at the moment, and you can put it higher as well if you want to. I put two builds in here, but I feel like Blade and Rage Blade is just such an enormous damage boost. Even if you're behind, you can come back into the game. It's nothing like massively new. You max your W which is really good now after the buffs, and you're one of the best late game choices, so you can always win a game. Stormrazor isn't that popular, but it does work if you want to burst harder, and I would max your Q for that build if you want to take that. But as I said, applying Silver Bolts every 2 autos with Rage Blade is insane. The only other thing to mention is that instead of going like full damage with Infinity Edge at the end, like I've shown you in build 1, you can start to get like a Guardian Angel or a Frozen Mallet or a more Malmortius, some more defense basically. You don't need to go full damage to win and to kill people. So Ashe was also buffed recently and a lot better, moved up in the rankings a ton. If you're the type of player who would rather counter the enemy making plays, like slow them down rather than kill everybody yourself, Ashe is amazing. She has very long range, a volley to poke with, arrow to set up kills with her ultimate, and is actually quite good versus stuff like Draven or Lucian because she can keep them away and stop them snowballing and getting killed. Lethal Tempo helps you get your passive up quicker, which is why we take that as a keystone, and she definitely needs the help damage wise because her damage is not the highest, especially not from abilities. The blade is going to make your early game just a little bit stronger in the lane phase, but then you're going to be slowing everybody with this with the runins. You'll deal percentage damage to all of them, you're going to heal from all of them as well, and eventually crit them all at the same time, so your team fight is really good. Now, Xayah could be a lot higher if you're good with her, but she is so hit and miss. In solo queue, sometimes she can be really good and sometimes terrible. Xayah Rakan is an insane lane though. At level 6, you should always win a fight, so you can engage that. Xayah has the burst, she scales well, she's ultra safe with her ultimate. Lethal Tempo and Fleet Footwork are your keystone choices, but pretty much everybody goes Lethal Tempo because you can get your feathers out a lot quicker. Even though Essence Reaver was buffed recently as well, nobody really uses it anymore on Xayah, and this is the core build you're going to be looking at every single game. You can actually also look at going 100% crit, mainly because of her W. So it makes her autos attack again for 20% of the damage. So if you're always critting, that thing blows people up late game. Jinx is actually another one who loves 100% crit for a different reason, but she is a solid pick we just don't see a ton of, and one of the better early game crit AD carries that we have. A lot of her strength is really with the Stormrazor and Rocket synergy early for the crits, nuking down towers with her minigun and her passive as well. She isn't like bad late game or anything, but those are amazing early if she gets a lead. So Fleet Footwork is the keystone of choice, but you can go Lethal Tempo or Press the Attack if you want a bit more damage. They both really work. Taking a damage keystone can definitely be good, but for build, there isn't really that much choice. You want your Stormrazor and Runins as soon as possible. That is 3 guaranteed AoE rocket crits now, and that is why we also tend to greed for 100% crit, so you can long range perma rocket crit. Miss Fortune could also be a lot higher in this video, and at low ranks she'd be top 5 easily. Her damage is still nuts, even after the Dark Harvest nerfs, it's still the way to go. It has a crazy mid game with all the AD and the arm pen and the burst damage. So you can go Comet if you want to for poke damage, but mostly it's going to be Dark Harvest, so really it scales much better. Build 1 is all about the ultimate damage. So you sit back, it will shred everybody to pieces because you have loads of arm penetration and loads of AD. The other option is really good with Dark Harvest. You have a long range Dust Blade and Dark Harvest and Stormrazor proc at the same time, and it is a ton of damage and burst, but normally it is better when you're ahead because it does rely around bursting people down. I feel like I've said this a lot, but Twitch could be a lot higher as well if you're good with him. He's the most insane late game champion in the game, at least win rate. So if that's what you like to play for late game, then pick Twitch. Early game, he loses a lot before 25 minutes though. Like you can just roll over him really. You can trade well, but you have to know him properly to do it. If you can get a lead, you roam, you snowball, it's great. Lethal Tempo is the way we go now normally for our keystone. You can also take Press the Attack. That is really good synergy with his poison stacking, and Fleet Footwork if you want something a bit more defensive. Since you have such high range with your ultimate, you don't really need much defense, and instead you go for 100% crit most of the time to nuke everybody down as soon as you press your ultimate. First Item Blade is really there to help you early game. It gives you like a little bit more utility. You have good damage with that. You can assassinate people, but the healing, like it heals you for a lot when it's hitting multiple people with your ultimate or with Runins. So now we're getting into kind of like the bottom tier champions in my opinion. Like Tristana is good if you can win your lane with an aggressive support, but if not, you're probably going to lack some damage mid game and really suffer for it. Press the Attack and Fleet Footwork are your keystone choices. I would honestly go Press the Attack because you need the damage. It's partly why as well we want to go for 100% crit, so we have the damage when we switch our Q on. She is mega safe and she can bash down towers really well, but damage doesn't really scale that well into mid game without you having an item lead. It's kind of the same thing with Caitlyn actually as well. She can have a decent early game pushing, taking towers, and a good late game at full build, but ability damage is not that high really, and she's just a worse version of Sivir. It honestly is just the same as Tristana. Everything I said applies here as well. You need full crit to make her headshots and auto attacks really hurt. She is safe, and if you get to late game, you can hard carry. So that's what you're playing for. Kogmaw could actually be above here. Like he is still just immobile, and an Irelia or an Akali will eat you for breakfast, but once he has 2 items, he does a lot better. There are quite a few different builds you can run fun, and lethal tempo is there for the damage. The synergy with Blade and Rage Bait is just amazing. It's the same reason it works on Vayne so well. So if you hit that point in the game, you will start to melt people. Looking at Varus, his poke build isn't as good, his AP build isn't as good, his laning isn't as good. It can be with a good support, but that's something a bit different. But your late game is really good if you can attack move and you can kite well. We're going for like full attack speed, basically. It's the only build I see at the moment. Again, looking at the Blade and the Rage Bait synergy to boost your damage. But a lot of it, like what makes you good, is how you use your ultimate. So Kalista is last here for Saleh Q. Again, no surprise, but on a good player, she can do really well, I think. Lethal tempo is still going to be the Keystone, so you can stack your spears a little bit faster. And it's the same as always. You stack it up and build lifesteal to last and kite longer so you get more damage out. I actually think her mid game isn't that bad. It's just her laning phase was nerfed so heavily, she can't really bully as much anymore. And that's kind of the entire point of the champion. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed the video and it gives you something to work with if you aren't sure like why certain builds work or picked a lot. Thank you for watching until the end. Make sure you like and subscribe if you haven't already. But for now, I will leave you with robots.